for school board in District 3. We're going to quickly...
So we'd like to hand this over to our guests first. And the format...
Again, I am Vicente Cruz, District 3 school board candidate.
I am Teresa Anderson, City at Large candidate.
Randy Mentamore, District 7 candidate.
I'm Andres Soto from Richmond, representing the Richmond Progressive Alliance. I'm Don McClay. I'm going to be running in District 1 for the City Council seat. I'm Dr. Terrence Candell, and I'll be running in my district, District 3 for City Council. Since you've introduced yourself, we have another couple of candidates over here. Might as well stand up and tell us who you are.
I'm Sean Sullivan. I'm running for Oakland City Council from District 3. My name is Richard Fuentes, and I'm running for school board in District 3.
We just described it a little bit, but the format is we're going to let our guests speak their minds, then we're going to break up and go into small groups, and then we're going to come back here and hold something of a town hall meeting together with questions and comments and accusations and all from the various groups. So I think we hand it over to Andres. You want to go first? Sure.
Normally I don't usually require a microphone, but I'm going to use one this evening. I'm kind of a little under the weather, my throat's a little sore. And if I ask you to repeat something that you asked me, it's because my ears are all plugged up and I can't really hear too well right now. I think I was brought here to really kind of, as a co-founder of the Richmond Progressive Alliance, to kind of talk about some of the lessons that we learned and why we're still viable almost, 8 years later. And I think the roots of it need to be understood that Richmond, unlike Oakland, has at-large elections. That has always favored the corporatocracy dominated by Chevron that runs the town. So it didn't matter whether, like the old days when the city council was mostly white folks, they bought those folks off to the detriment of the white majority at that time. Same thing when African Americans came to power. They bought off the African American political leadership to the detriment of the African American community. And with the rise of the Latinos, we start to see the same pattern happen again. So one of the things that I learned, my background was I went to Cal, I'm a political science guy, and I've spent my professional career both in and out of politics as an advocate. Always advocating in the community, but sometimes even getting paid professionally to be an advocate for causes, particularly youth violence prevention and gun control. In 2002, 10 years ago on Cinco de Mayo, me and my 2 sons and some neighbors and others were beaten and pepper sprayed and arrested by the Richmond Police Department in what I call the 2002 Cinco de Mayo Richmond Police Riot. Having a background in political science, one of the things I knew was that the reason the police felt they could get away with beating up Mexicans that night was because they knew they had the green light from the city council and the city administration. And they knew that the city council got the green light from the corporatocracy. So, having been involved in numerous causes, I reached out to a good friend of mine, Juan Reardon, who was one of the founding members of the Richmond Greens. And we had spoken about what it's going to take to turn Richmond around. Well, Richmond has the highest per capita Democratic Party registration of any city in the Bay Area, 77%. And one of the things Juan doesn't like me to talk about publicly is that in Richmond we have more declined estates than Republicans, Greens, Peace and Freedom, American Independent, whatever else, other parties you want combined. That's how democratic it is. And votes are controlled through mechanisms like the Building Trades Union and the Central Labor Council, who many of us on the left like to think of as allies, when in fact they're usually very self-interested in their own membership's needs and really have very little to do with the community's needs. But given that reality, then how do issues actually help us to create a wedge and define how we as progressives are different? So we decided to create the Richmond Progressive Alliance, a unity of Greens and Progressive Democrats. And it was under a mutual agreement. And, we went through all the processes of, well, what are our principles, what do we stand for, all that kind of stuff, which is very important in getting to know each other. But in the end, I would say the one principle that's lasted through the years, and frankly, I'm not exactly sure how relevant it is given the era of PACs and super PACs, is we don't accept corporate donations. That's the one bottom line. Candidates who want the RP endorsement have to stand for. No corporate donations. Now, what happened along the way? Well, in 2004, we ran our first two candidates. Myself and Gail McLaughlin, who was a new arrival in town, no political experience, had never served any kind of office, appointed or otherwise. And in the election, the corporatocracy that we took on, they usually use their attack dogs. In this case, the Richmond Police Department, or the Richmond Police Officers Association, and the Richmond Firefighters Association. These are the entities that they use to attack people. If you recall the last election, they came out with a very dirty mailer exposing Gail, who later became a mayor, our mayor, and is currently our mayor, some issues that she had in her past that people felt were below the belt. So to that end, I guess the real lessons are you have to work across party lines for progressive issues. Define issues in the community that will create a wedge between the progressives and the other guys. And we call them the conservatives, even though they started adopting the language of progressive, calling themselves progressives. But we continue to frame them as conservatives. It's not a rosy road all the way. Sometimes our own people disappoint us, and we're having right now an issue with City Councilman Jeff Riggman on how do we make him accountable. So these are some of the lessons I think that folks need to consider when you bring in a Progressive Alliance. But in the end, I think the model that we have shown in Richmond is this is how you change the political paradigm in the community. And you have to go grassroots, which I understand everybody here is committed to. So thank you for the brief story, and I could go on for hours if you wanted, but for the interest of this group, we'll just keep it at that. Thank you.
I think I just elected myself MC. And Vicente, are you going to stay timekeeper?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so of our guests, who would like to step up next? Okay, Larry? Do you want this thing on the stand?
Yeah, I want to. Okay, yeah. Use this. Excuse me for using notes, but I don't give the speech every day. I'm a historian that sits and writes most of the time. My name's Lawrence Shoup, or Larry Shoup, people call me. In 1996, I ran for District 1 City Council, and there were 5 candidates. And of course, I spent $10,000, which was the lowest of any of the 5 candidates. One of the candidates spent over $80,000, Peter Smith. He didn't win in the first round. Jane Bruner was second. She spent around $35,000. And of course, I took third. I had 18%. And so Jane Bruner and Peter Smith went at it in the runoff, and Jane Bruner won. My program in 1996, I think, is still relevant today. So I'd like to give you a few insights from it, a few ideas from it. It was based on ecology and social justice. That was the focus. I had the idea of confronting global warming on a local level through urban gardening, organic gardening in the urban area, in private and public spaces. Massive tree planting all around the city, but especially in the flatland areas that don't have very much greenery. I was also for, of course, public transportation, bike lanes, things like bike lanes, increase biking, give the opportunity for people to do biking. Just cause for tenants. Tenants did not have just cause for eviction at that time. Due to my putting it forward, we later got a coalition going and were able to have a ballot measure which got just cause eviction for tenants. And that organization still exists to just cause. We could not get it through the city council. In fact, that's one of the reasons I ran against Jane Berman, because I talked to her before the campaign and asked her if she would support just cause for tenants. Tenants being evicted without any reason by a landlord who wanted to raise the rent. I said, this is unconscionable. We should not allow the landlords to run the city. We should have just cause for tenants. The tenants would have some rights. She refused to support that, and that's why I ran against her. One of the reasons. There were some other reasons. She said she didn't know a thing about ecology. I also advocated for a police review board with teeth. So I thought that was very important to do. Some of the things like that was what I advocated, homeless, some things for the homeless, etc. The situation today, other than just cause being a victory, I think the overall situation is probably worse. We have an economy in this country of exploitation. We have criminal wars. We have ecological decline, really disaster going on, a sharp erosion of real democracy, that Citizens United decision, for example, becoming more and more corporatocracy, continued betrayal by the two main corporate parties, continued betrayal of the people, and that's created a lot of hardship in this country, and it put the Earth's ecosystems in increasing peril. Now, our role in this situation, what I would advocate for, is we need to be the voice of principled opposition, advancing a vision way beyond the corrupt system of business as usual, and advocating our program for real democracy by, of, and for the people, for peace, social justice, and saving our planet, for a Green New Deal, as a Green Party candidate, Jill Stein, has been advocating on the national level. She's a presidential candidate for the Green Party. I think the 1996 program I had is still valid today. The two things that I would add is, first of all, I'm just wrapping it up now. In terms of program, we need to advocate for a city-controlled port with the benefits flowing for jobs, education, and health for our people and the people of Oakland. In terms of tactics, I believe we need to walk on two legs. That is, we need direct action as well as electoral action. And direct action can be mass or it can be individual. I think that every candidate here should walk the streets and talk to people door to door. That's the way you really reach the people. It's very important to do door-to-door campaign. I didn't do enough of it when I ran for office myself, even though I knew it was important. So we need to be about fostering a needed transition towards direct democracy, and that's where the Occupy comes in, and that's where the Occupy has taught us a wonderful example. What the city of Oakland has done to the Occupy movement, their treatment, is at the hands of city authorities, and the police in particular, is an outrage, and it shows the complete bankruptcy of those in power in our city. It's a total outrage. Here we had people trying to help the homeless, set up a system where people would be fed, and how would they get treated? They get beaten by the police, attacked. It was outrageous. So let me close by returning to the importance of urban organic gardening and urban agriculture in the city. There's a recent study by UC Berkeley people that found that there's 1,200 acres of public-owned land in the city of Oakland that could be used for urban gardening. This was a specific study done by the city of Berkeley, the university, to show that there's a lot of space available. So I would advocate that we need that big time. That's ecologically sound. It's food-wise sound. The city has had a program for 7 years to try to get this going, and nothing's happened, basically. And their goal is 5%, to raise 5% of the city's food needs in the city of Oakland. Havana, Cuba supplies 80% of their city's food is grown in the city of Havana, Cuba. 80%. So we're trying for 5%, we're not getting anything. So the Occupy, interestingly enough, has, I'm going to make an announcement when I'm done. Occupy has set up, we need to occupy our food supply, end the corporate food regime. And there's going to be a direct action. It's on a farm that already exists. There's not going to be any police there. You're not going to seize any land. From 3 to 6 on Monday at 975 85th Avenue in East Oakland. 975 85th Avenue in East Oakland at a farm there from 3 to 6 on Monday, next Monday, the 27th. Occupy our food supply and start growing urban agriculture, pushing urban agriculture in Oakland. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. And some of those ideas we're going to ask you to write down for us. So, who of our speakers? Andrea, would you like to go? I think Sean, are you ready? Laura? Okay, so your turn is coming.
Thanks. My name is Andrea Pritchett, and I have worked for 22 years with Berkeley Cop Watch, and I've had an opportunity to observe police functioning and misfunctioning for quite some time. I'm happy that Vicente invited me to share some thoughts, because I think this is a really defining issue, especially in the city of Oakland. We may disagree about the role or the importance of police. I think there are some among us who may even feel that the whole notion of police is not really a helpful thing at this point, that the very definition of police is the monopoly on violence and the ability to use violence against the people. I noticed in some of the literature I read on the table, it said that you are against police violence, and that's sort of strange to me because I thought the police were violence. And so I think it's important to begin to formulate a response. You know, this Oakland is not made only of Occupy. Oakland is made out of folks who were here long before and will be here long after. And so I think it's important to talk about what is crime, and the current approach to crime in Oakland is crime suppression. It's denial. It is out of sight, out of mind. It is beat it down, beat it back, don't show your head around here. Don't let your needs, your glaring, gaping needs be exposed, so we beat them down. I have a lot of thoughts about police, but and that's in the long term. The triage in the short term, in the Green Party term. I think it's important to be looking at mutual aid pacts. I think it's important to look at the federalization of the Oakland Police Department. I think a direction that the Greens could lead us is in a direction of community control. It won't be absolute community control, but it's a direction. And that the more control we have over this department, the better. And there are ways to do that. There's a Coalition for a Safe San Francisco, Coalition for a Safe Berkeley, who have made some inroads in questioning the mutual aid agreements that our cities are involved in, including Secure Communities and many others. Those of us who have been involved in the protests at Occupy certainly have been surveilled, have certainly been documented, and it seems like these days we don't even question that it's just part of the institution, that if you participate in political protest, you are having your file, you are being photographed, face recognition, to the point where the OPD is able to publish and distribute sort of a least wanted list of organizers, that they get to put that out there. That needs to stop. That needs to fundamentally stop. It's also true that traditionally, I think the Green Party, let's imagine that everybody gets elected. One of the things you're going to be called on to do is to manage the city's liability. And so, of course, you don't want to admit police misconduct because that exposes the city to lawsuits. And so you're going to find yourself in that contradiction. And I say this, there is a wonderful policy currently in effect in Oakland, which is about the early warning systems, that officers who are identified over and over and over again as problem officers, there could be much more dramatic interventions that happen to prevent this kind of behavior. Of course, these are triage measures. They're not systemic. They're not fundamental. But they're something that could relieve some of the ways that people are suffering in Oakland right now. I also want to say this, I think it's important, I think there's a possibility of civilianizing the police function. if police really are just the folks who come around with guns and violence and so forth, then why are they showing up at my friend's house at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night with the domestic, with the batterer, because he just wants to drop off a few things? You see, the way that Oakland is dealing with interviewing witnesses, investigating cases, that can all be done much more cheaply by civilians. So I'd like to see the Green Party lead us in a civilianization of the police department and into crime prevention. Thank you very much.
I think you'll find a little bit of support here for civilian control of police. Not to mention restorative justice. Sean? You walk too close, you're up.
Thanks, Laura's helping me pass out some flyers. Thank you for your time. Before I get started with what I have to say, I just want to do a little quick 1-minute social experiment. My name is Sean McDougall. I'm from the Community Democracy Project. What I would like you to do is take 10 seconds or so to think about if there was one thing you could change about the way Oakland works in terms of the city government, what would it be? Think about it a little bit, and then turn and find one person who you don't already know super well. Introduce yourself and exchange your answer with them. Find out what they think and share what you think with them. Take 1 minute to do that, please. If there's one thing you could change about the way the Oakland city government works, what would it be? Introduce yourself.
I'd like to see more of the city budget aimed at local schools, and to see the city council fight for state and federal funding.
Yeah, I
Seconds.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that wasn't historic to the national
and also peg them together.
All right. Thank you. All right. Excellent. Thank you very much. How many people thought that was an interesting little activity, even though it was brief? Okay, some people are bored, but it's okay. But the reason I did that activity with you is because I come from the philosophy of democracy. And if you don't, there's more flyers. I have extra flyers, so if you didn't get one, I'll get you one. I come from the philosophy of democracy, which means that ultimately we don't need a few more experts. We don't need to elect the right expert. We need the people to acknowledge the expertise they have already amongst themselves, right? We need the people to stop feeling like politics is a spectator sport. We need to bridge the divide between those of us who are activists in so many ways, activating and mobilizing our hearts out every day, and the people who wish things were different but aren't doing anything about it, right? And what the Community Democracy Project posits as a solution to the problem of why our movements are so weak and why we don't have democracy is we need to practice democracy. We need people to have the experience of democracy so they will demand democracy. People tend to demand what they see in the world as possible around them. If people only see the corporatocracy and the rat race, then they think that the American dream is the only answer to their problems. And so one of the things that we're doing, inspired by Porto Alegre in Brazil and other places around the world, but taking it to the next level in Oakland, is we're doing a voter initiative to create direct democracy in terms of the city budget of Oakland. So neighborhood assemblies throughout the city will be gathering places. We will share information and ideas, discuss, debate, and ultimately decide on the city budget. It's never been done to the extent that we're proposing to do it. Right now we're in the process of building a coalition, talking to different church groups, community groups, organizations, unions, getting people on board, finalizing the initiative. The broad details are already there though. Another thing besides democracy that inspires us is community. A lot of people don't consider themselves political, right? And so how do we help people see that the things that they care about, family, school, community, connection, are really political questions? In other words, questions that have to do with people power. How do we help people break out the alienation, disconnection? So, I guess I'll leave you with this thought, and then I look forward to the small group discussion. 20 seconds. What will it take to build a movement in this country that ultimately demands that the 60% or so of our federal taxes that goes to the military instead goes to things like healthcare, education, things that help us? We need people to have the practice of realizing that the budget is not some abstract thing, but everyday people need to have the power. And so I invite you to join us. Information is on the flyer, and I look forward to small groups. Thanks.
See where we're like, Sean?
What?
We're saying nice things about you, don't listen. All right, I'd like to bring up our last speaker. Laura Wells has been our candidate for governor. She's going to be our candidate for governor again, I believe. And she's involved in organizing East Bay Social Forum right now. And after Laura speaks, we'll start to break for our tables and all that, and I'll come back to talk about that.
Actually, after I ran for governor against Jerry Brown and Meg Whitman in 2010, and as a reward, I was arrested outside of a debate. It was a gubernatorial debate. I was a candidate, and the magic words that the security guard, who recognized that I was a candidate, said to me were, "You don't belong here." And so and you need to leave. Well, once he said I didn't belong there, I did belong there. We do belong there. Occupy belongs there. And when they arrested me, the charge was trespassing at a private party. We're going to make it a public party, and I'm really thrilled to hear. I've had the opportunity to hear Andres Soto talk about the Richmond Progressive Alliance and to learn about it from various people in Richmond. I'm thrilled at how that's happening. I'm ecstatic that it looks like Oakland Progressive Alliance is going to be happening, because what we need to do is to start having people run and win at the local level, and so I'm thrilled about that. For myself, what I'm exploring, I was thinking, okay, exploratory for state controller, because really all I want to talk about is the money, the budget, the finances, because when the budget is wrong, it's all wrong. There's nothing, and they blame it on, well, there's budget, there's no money, there's no money. There's 60% of the budget available for the military. We know how much is available for the police here in Oakland and everywhere else around the country. There is money. This is a wealthy state. It's a wealthy country. We're a wealthy people, and we need to manage our own finances. So the things that I realized, that the state controller, the reason that I would even want to run and have this exploratory campaign for a state controller in 2014 is that I have two main civic wishes, and they both have a very great effect on the local as well. And one is, and this is probably why I was arrested outside, in San Rafael, was a state bank, a state-owned bank, publicly owned bank, so that we can control our own money supply, and it could invest in California, not Wall Street, or in Oakland, San Francisco, not Wall Street, make good loans to homeowners and students and local businesses, and partner with credit unions and local banks, which is right in line with, I love the fact that the electoral movements and the social movements can come together. And that's what I see as the Richmond Progressive Alliance and as the potential Oakland Progressive Alliance, where the social movements and the electoral movements come together. So one thing is publicly owned banks, not publicly bailed out banks, publicly owned banks. And the other is to get rid of that stupid 2/3 majority to raise revenue in the legislature. And that came in with Prop 13. Every other sentence on the ballot statement had to do with real estate and property. But this one sentence that it requires a 2/3 majority to raise taxes in the legislature, that is, people think of that as a safeguard so that the government won't raise too many taxes on you. You know, of course, we all know taxes, we've been getting taxes, we've been paying taxes. That 2/3 majority is a safeguard for the super rich, the 1%. And I have a yellow sheet that has an open letter to Jerry Brown that talks a lot more about that on the back table. And my blog and junk like that, stuff like that. We're going to get the message out. But meanwhile, I just want to encourage us all to give a huge round of applause to the people who are running for office here in Oakland. And thank you very much.
Laura always says nice things to us. Thank you. And thank you all for being here. Now here's the part where we would like us to break into groups, and we would like our speakers and our candidates to spread out and be at different tables so that we get as many people kind of out talking to somebody you don't know. And we have put out here, we have this very strange idea that politics should actually be something about ethics. So we put up a little thing called Commitments for Progressive Candidates here. And this is about ethics. And then we have another thing here called the Oakland Green Party presents a platform proposal. Remember that word, proposal? For an Oakland Alliance. Now we would like you to get to your groups and pick somebody who will do some kind of note-taking. Look at these documents and make notes right on them, because we're going to ask you to hand them back to us. And we would like you to, we want to do something a little constructive here. We'd like you to look at each one and see if there's something you really like, something you say, wow, that rings. And the other thing we'd like you to say is what's missing. We'd like you to see about what's missing. And the third thing we'd like you to talk about is not on these pieces of paper, and is what does it mean to be alliance. Right now we have 4 people from the Green Party who are running for office, but we're understanding that we are only part of a larger movement. How can we work together? How can we come to an understanding and actually propose, as Terrence and I were talking the other day, what are the policies? What would make a difference? How can we actually address these issues that we pretty much all agree on? But what would build an alliance? And we do not think that this should be a thing only for the Green Party. We don't want to close our minds or close our ability to work with other people. But we have to figure out what are the issues and things that would actually build something that could move Oakland in a direction to address some of those really serious problems. So thank you all for coming, and now let's break into our tables.
Actually, you all don't have to move.